We humans seem to be the most successful species on Earth. In only a few thousand years, we have evolved from being just another species of ape to having more or less control over all other living species on this planet, as well as having, to some extent, influence over the planet itself. We have influence, but we do not have control over all the consequences of our actions. However, it is very possible, and maybe even probable, that our success is nothing more than the road to failure and collapse. Let us analyze why this seems to be the case. All living species on this planet are part of smaller or larger ecosystems. An ecosystem is the complex of living organisms, also called biotic elements of the ecosystem. Their physical, non-living environment, also called abiotic elements, and all their interrelationships. An ecosystem, then, is above all else a community, a cohabitation of different species in harmony with a particular environment. Adaptability is the inner motion of any ecosystem. All ecosystems are organized in a state of balance where species are constantly adapting to both the environment and each other. This aspect of close relationships between different species was well explained by Charles Darwin in his book On the Origin of Species. There is a common misconception that this book is about the evolution of species, but it is really about the adaptation of species to changing environmental conditions, including the ongoing development of other species. What Darwin observed was that over time species transformed through genetic variation in order to adapt. This irrefutable law of nature occurs in every individual of every species, and through natural selection, the most useful variations in any individual will help it to thrive and therefore reproduce, with a chance of perpetuating that respective variation in future offspring. As the French chemist Lavoisier said, in nature nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed. This cycle is known in biology as the food chain or food web. That means that the whole ecosystem is interconnected, that all species are interdependent and continually influencing one another. So, every ecosystem on this planet has to be in a state of equilibrium in order to be functional. This means that every species has a role to play in the ecosystem, a role interwoven with others, things it takes from the environment as well as things it gives in return, something that other life forms make use of and depend upon. No species has the privilege of only receiving without giving back. This is an internal law of all ecosystems. What ecosystems are we humans part of, and how do other species depend on us? What role we do have and how do we play it within the planetary equilibrium? It is hard to say. At some point in our history, humans began to ignore or refuse to play their role in maintaining the ecosystem's balance. A long time ago, we started isolating ourselves from any ecosystem that could benefit from our presence. This didn't happen all of a sudden, but over time, we have successfully managed to extract ourselves from the natural order of things, the very order of things that brought us into being. In learning how to cooperate in larger and larger groups of individuals, we were able to avoid all our natural predators and place ourselves on the top of the food chain. Even though we are not a species that is particularly well equipped physically, we became the apex predators. Even our dead bodies have been kept from the natural process of recycling nutrients back into nature. Whether buried or burnt, no other species are allowed to make use of our dead bodies anymore. Later in our history, we began to establish larger and larger settlements. With every generation, these settlements grew further and further away from nature, becoming more and more isolated from any ecosystem. We created own sort of ecosystem, but one that is awry, far removed from any natural one. In a natural ecosystem, there are always hundreds and thousands of species involved, from bacteria and fungi to large herbivores and predators. Every form of life plays an important role in the ecosystem's health. However, in these so-called ecosystems that we have created, only a few species are allowed, those that we can directly use and exploit. Those we cannot exploit are fought against, and we have largely succeeded in this, driving many towards extinction. In nature, a high biodiversity means a highly stable ecosystem. Less diversity means that there are more chances for an ecosystem to collapse. If there are plenty of species in the ecosystem, the role of an individual species diminishes. Our agricultural skills and knowledge have pushed us further away from natural ecosystems. This has been a major blow to the planetary balance. We started to seize larger and larger areas of land, cultivating and breeding only those species that we could directly benefit from. This meant isolating those areas from the ecosystems they used to be a part of, while also disrupting every pre-existing natural equilibrium. Through the use of synthetic chemical products, we eliminated hundreds of species of insects, rodents, herbivores, and plants that we cannot take direct and immediate advantage of. Numerous species have fallen victim to our relentless effort to eliminate pests. In the case of modern industrial agriculture, our impact is larger and more devastating than it ever has been before. All farm byproducts, from food to waste, are under our strict control, and nature is not allowed to intervene. So, human activity disrupts the environment and causes imbalance to neighboring ecosystems. This subsequently throws off the planetary equilibrium. Our success as a species has meant disruption to the overall balance of the planet. If only we could have left room to breathe on this planet, but we did not. Our rising population and consumer demand has left only about 5% of the Earth untouched. This is far too little, and we will soon be forced to face the consequences, or come up with an answer to this question. Is it possible for a species to survive when it is completely isolated from every other ecosystem on the planet? In our effort to understand how this planet functions, we haven't discovered any other species that could live isolated from an ecosystem. To believe that humans are an exception to this rule makes no sense. There is no biological foundation and no reasonable explanation. Things are hopeless unless we can figure out how to live a parasitoid life that prevents our host from dying. This would mean understanding Earth's processes, preserving and enforcing them, allowing the planet to live while we exploit it. In the end, this is what sustainability is all about. Even so, humans do not seem too preoccupied with this issue at this moment in our existence. We still seem to believe that we are different from all other species and exempt from all laws of nature. For many, It is taboo to compare humans with other species. Unfortunately, however, we are not the most important beings in the universe, and nobody will come to save us. We are on our own. If God exists, he, she, or it has no clue who or where we are.